December 2024. I'm in a mystery location somewhere in North America. And I'd just like to welcome you to Mystery Brew on a Saturday. It's like whack a day here, isn't it? Saturday, there's school today. So what are you going to do? You gotta cower in fear of the storm that just is attacking the UK at the moment. It's kind of weird. It's almost as though, and I mentioned this on Ollie's show last night, it's almost as though if you've got a closed system and you put more energy into that system, the system becomes more energetic. I don't know much about physics, but that kind of makes sense to me. The Earth is a closed system. Yeah, bit of a worry. So big shout out to everyone out there. If you're watching, please let me know in the chat. That would be wonderful. And today we're going to be talking about Cowardly Old World as opposed to Brave New World, the famous book by Aldous Huxley. And thank you. And that line that people often trot out about, the new world, these new ideas. And the reason why I want to talk about this in particular is I think Rachel shared a meme this morning in our little WhatsApp group, and it was about I'm just putting sugar in my coffee, and I know that's a really bad thing to do, but I need some zip. I need some Xeno zip. For anyone who's read the Alien Genocide comics will know what I'm talking about. Anyway, and it was simple meme that you often see, and it was like Star Trek, and it said, "This is the future the liberals want." And then underneath it was, I don't know, Handmaid's Tale. It was the Imperial Army from Star Wars or something like that. And it said, "This is the future the right-wingers want." And it's absolutely spot on. It is absolutely spot on. It is just grotesquely bizarre that there are so many people out there who look back on Nazi Germany and conclude that the wrong people won World War II. The wrong people won World War II, when people who idealize and eulogize World War I and World War II and go on about it all the freaking time, warheads, poppy rage people, they honestly believe that the wrong side won. They're sitting there going, yeah, but if Nazi Germany won, then, the trains would run on time. But is the news right? They didn't. That line about Mussolini making the trains run on time is bullshit. He never did. It was just a lie. Like, who got the trains running on time? The Swiss. The old joke is, if you're at a Swiss train station and you look at your watch and the train's not there on time, then either it's not a Swiss train or it's not a Swiss watch. That's the joke. And they've had 500 years of peace, democracy, and brotherly love. What did they invent? Trains that ran on time. That's what they invented, Mr. Lime. I don't know. A mysterious location in NA. Hi, Graham. Afternoon, badgers. Hope everyone is well. A storm Dara is battering the Isle of Man with winds up to 80 miles an hour. Bloody hell. Hope everyone's staying safe. Sfax is there. Hello, Graham. Hi, chat. Hi, Sfax. How you doing? MH Kara is there as well. So, I want to talk today, and I hope you indulge me, and I hope you add some personal anecdotes and experiences that you've had about how there is not just, I call it the empathy gap, this idea. I'm not the one who's coined that phrase. I'm sure someone else has said it many, many times before, but I don't want to take credit for something I haven't did. But the idea is that there are people on the political spectrum, and they don't necessarily need to be left and right and centre, whatever, but you can separate them out into people who have empathy and people who lack empathy. And generally speaking, the people who lack empathy tend to gravitate towards these demagogues, these populist leaders, simple solutions to complex problems, the Faragers, the Johnsons, the Trumps of the world. And the people who feel empathetic, who care about other people, they're walking down the street to see a homeless person, they feel bad. They don't laugh at them. They don't go, oh, thank God that isn't me. That type. When you work in an office, and many moons ago I did work in an office. You go in and you say, oh, I've got a cold, right? So not something that would stop you from going into work. Like literally, you've got a runny nose, right? And then half the people in the office will be like, oh my God, let me get you a Lemsip, let me get you a cup of tea, what do you need? Do you want me to go to the shop and get some lockets? Really, really caring, nurturing, empathetic response. And then the other half says this, oh, don't give it to me. And I'm like, chances are, if you were going to get it from me, you would have got it before I, started getting symptoms. Because that's the way colds work. Because don't forget, your cold is not the problem. It's not the bug that's making your nose run or your throat sore or making you cough. It's your body's response to the bug. Your body is trying to get rid of the bug. That's why when you have a fever, you get really hot because your body is trying to boil the bug out of you. If you then you go really cold because your body is trying to freeze the bug out of you. They're trying to work. Your antibody system is trying to work out ways of getting rid of this bloody thing, and making you sneeze, making lots of snot come out of you, is a very good way. It's a very effective way of getting that bug out of your system before it multiplies too much and kills you. So that's what the bug wants to do. The bug doesn't give you symptoms. The bug just wants to kill you. Maybe not in the case of the common cold, but that kind of response, we can chalk that down to a basic, I don't know, a little bit of narcissism, don't give it to me, but also a lack of empathy. Not like, oh shit, you're ill, let's make you comfortable. Let's see what we can do to help in this situation. And going back to Star Trek, I don't know this is a direct quote or something that I've misremembered after reading an article by Stephen Fry many years ago, but there was a line in the original series where Kirk was musing over the three most beautiful words in the English in the universe, the three most beautiful words in the universe. And I think Bones says, "Well, I love you," and he says, "No, please help me." And I don't know if they actually say that verbatim in the show, but that idea that there are some of us who actively look for people to help, and when we're walking down the street and we see people who are in a bad way, our first instinct is not to ignore them or trip over them or kick them out the way or just be horrible. I mean, our first instinct is, oh my God, I need to do something about this. I don't want these people on the streets, not because it's making me feel uncomfortable that people on the street, but genuinely, it's the middle of winter. People on the streets, like in a capitalist society that has loads of excess money pouring out of its ears, like, why can't we give these people homes? Because someone explained to me why we can't give them homes. Don't say we can't afford it, because we can. We totally can. The reason why we don't give homeless people homes, which we did, we accommodated them during COVID, all of them, every single homeless person during COVID. There wasn't a single person on the street in the first lockdown because they were all given somewhere to stay. We had the ability to do it all along, but we chose not to. For two reasons. One, sadism. We want these people to suffer. We want them to suffer for not, for transgressing the rules of life, for doing something different, for failing, not having the bank of mum and dad to go to or a house that they can go to and stay with their mum and dad. They've failed in life through no fault of their own, usually, or maybe they've been in the army and they've got PTSD and that's been untreated because we don't treat people correctly for mental health problems. Although, good news, I have got my ADHD appointment in about a month's time. And also, Tansky, hi, if you're watching, she's also got her ADHD appointment next month as well. That's the labour difference, I guess, after years of waiting. Finally, under a Labour administration, we might actually get some help with our conditions. But when it comes to these solutions to these sort of complex sociological problems, wait a moment while I appear to have developed a cough. It is a bit weird because I always make fun of the right, and I've said it already on the show today, for falling for simple solutions to complex problems. What I think there is a dearth of is not simple solutions to complex problems, because they're very complex and there's a lot we need to do. However, just let me go on a little side quest here. If you wanted to do something that seems really, really complex, like going to every country in the world without flying, you start small. You start off in one country, then you work out how to get to the next country. You don't do all 197 countries at once and go, right, that's it. I'm going to hold this all in my head. You write it out, like you write out a story, and it progresses as you go. So something as complex as the logistics behind that, or let's say the writing of War and Peace, for instance, it's not like, is it Dostoevsky who wrote War and Peace? I always get them mixed up with Tolstoy. Whoever wrote it, didn't turn up that day and said, "Oh, right, I'm going to dump a book." He spent a long time writing it. So if you think about how a book is put together, it's word by word. Okay, so you can have these complex problems, and what you really need is expertise and time, and put those two things together, and you can achieve you can solve amazingly complex problems. But what the right seem to want is simple solutions to complex problems, not by breaking it down into its constituent building blocks, which is why I'm talking about writing a story or planning, logistics. But I'm talking about when people take something as complex as immigration, for instance, decide it's a bad thing, which it isn't, but whatever. And then they say, here's how we're going to stop it. And a really great example of this is like the Rwanda scheme, which was just objectively nuts. Like, how could that ever possibly work? It couldn't. It wouldn't put anyone off. It was only going to be less than 1% of refugees coming across in small boats. It's not going to put anyone off. And the actual solution to the problem of people coming over to small boats was staring us in the face, which is safe routes. So what I see is, if you're going to solve a problem, right, you have to have a look at what type of problem it is. So homeless people, what's the solution to them not being homeless people anymore? Well, you could do what Mugabe did in Harare and kill them, because he did that. Or you could arrest them and make them spend more time in custody, costing the taxpayer money, going into hospital because they've hurt themselves, or they're suffering from hypothermia, or they've OD'd on drugs because that's all they've got, all that, right? Or you can give them somewhere to live. Literally give them somewhere to live. Why not? It will be cheaper. Again, my mantra, it makes economic sense, and it also makes moral sense. It's cheaper. And Shelter have published data on this, to actually give give homeless people somewhere to live, a permanent address, right? Because then they can get a bank account, then they can get a job, then they can reintegrate themselves into society and give them the support they need. It is cheaper to do that than to leave them on the streets. Why? Because emergency services cost a lot of money, and a lot of our emergency services are taken up with caring for people who are homeless for obvious reasons. They're more likely to get ill, they're more likely to do themselves a mischief, they're more likely to use the NHS than someone who's just working in an office job, for instance. And so you've got this idea that, oh well, there's a complex answer to this simple problem. it's just mad, isn't it? So the complex solution to people coming over in boats is to take them to Rwanda after a court proceedings, after having to violate international law, having to make new laws to say they're going to violate international laws, and then you've got to pay for the people in Rwanda. And then what do you do if someone's coming over from Goma and DRC and they're literally running away from the Rwandan soldiers who have come across the border to try and mess things up in Eastern Congo? That is a complex solution to a simple problem, a complex solution that doesn't work because they haven't thought it through. And we get this a lot on their side. So you got this weird thing where we're sitting here going, okay, if you have a complex problem, we need to break it down into its constituent parts, make those constituent parts quite simple on their own, but then all put it together, you will make quite a complex network, book, plan, whatever it is. You get it all together. And that makes sense to me, complex solutions to complex problems. If you break them down, that's the way to solve it. It's what they do in physics, it's what they do in science. break it down to its constituent parts and try and work out how they work. That's why you've got the standard model in physics. That's why you've got the DNA unraveling for all these different genomes that we're picking up for, we're working out for animals and humans and plant life, everything. Work out the very basic building blocks, and from all that, everything else stems. And chemistry, periodic table, it's the building blocks. There you go. There's the building blocks. These are the properties of each individual chemical. And from that, you can make a myriad chemicals. Music, like you look at a keyboard on a piano, 88 keys. I mean, they all sound a bit different. And yet people can make the most amazing music, complex music, Rachmaninoff music. But it all starts with notes. It all starts with, okay, this note and then this note, or this chord, this. And if you break it down to its constituent parts, it's dead fucking simple. What the right want to do is they want to take something that is a complex problem and they want a simple solution to it. And not just a simple solution that's been broken down into its constituent parts. I mean, just like a one size fits all, this will stop this thing from happening. It's Trump's wall. How do we stop people coming over from Mexico? I'm going to build a wall. That is tremendously logistically complex. It is really expensive. It makes no sense, because if someone builds a 15-foot wall, you just come along with a 16-foot ladder and go over it. Okay. And how can you see what people are doing on the other side of the wall? You need to see that. Okay, well, we'll make these bars, all these bars close to each other. Okay, you're gonna have bars, all right. So so can people grab hold of the bars and like climb up the bars? Like people climb up trees. Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. So they could do that. Yeah. Or if you don't build a complete wall, we can just go round it, right? Just go round the wall. Yeah, really, really useful there. And then this plan that Trump's got at the moment, which is to deport everyone who looks at him funny. Deport them to where? Again, it's a complex solution to a simple problem. Well, it's not even a problem. It's not even a problem in America. America is a country of immigrants. The only people in America who have a right to complain about immigration is the Native Americans. That's it. The indigenous peoples of the land, whose land was stolen from them by Whitey here. So yeah, this idea of the world that the liberals want, the world that empathetic people want, and the world that the right want, and the narcissists and the psychopaths want, it couldn't be more different. It's two completely different world views. One is a futuristic utopia, Star Trek. There's no money anymore. You just have replicators. You can get your Earl Grey hot without having to pay for it. And what's left to do but to explore and research and find out stuff about like the universe and everything. Great. And people have jobs. People go and do things. Not for the money, but because they want to do those things. And for anything else, you've got, it's not really a robotic society. Star Trek is it? You got Data with his positronic brain, but apart from that, not too many robots running around the Star Trek universe. But things seem to get done. Places get cleaned up. I haven't seen a cleaner on Star Trek Enterprise. Maybe there is an Enterprise cleaner. Angry Winds in One Angry Pagan's neck of the woods. You missed me on the stream last night, Graham. Was fun. Oh, One Angry Pagan, you were on the stream last night. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I could only get on for a minute. My internet was a bit rubbish. But that was Steve. But thank you very much for the super chat, mate. But that was Stephen Fry. Miss you, remember that. But what Kirk actually said was, "Let me help." Wow, Yodi, that's quite niche. That is quite niche that we both knew. You knew what I was talking about there, and me saying, I don't know if this is actually what he said because it's phased through Stephen Fry. Afternoon, empathy. A few years ago on Christmas Eve, there was a harpist busking and it was freezing. She looked like a van traveller. I donated 20 quid. My ex was like, blah, 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 why? Yeah. I'll tell you a story many, many moons ago. And it's just a little thing. I had a friend come and stay with me who was from London. And I always remember we went into a shop to get a can of Coke or something. And got chatting to the guy behind the counter about the football. And as we were walking out, I remember my mate saying to me, "Do you know him?" And I went, "No." He goes, "Why'd you talk to him then?" And I was like, the most London thing to say. Why would you talk to someone that you don't know? What's wrong with you? An act of generosity, justice shouldn't need explaining. The answer to why do you do such and such is just because. Yeah, but I mean, I when I do something good, I feel good. And when I do something bad, when I do something awful or say something that I shouldn't have done, and I clearly have upset someone by what I've done or said, I feel awful. Like it'll keep me awake at night. Like seriously, it'll keep me awake at night. And I'll think about it years later. It'll just come back to me for some random point walking down the street, and I'll feel like a pang in my stomach, like oh god, a pang of crippling embarrassment. Oh Jesus. Um, so yeah, that's how you're supposed to feel, I think, as a human. I don't think there's anything wrong with me in that respect. I think that it's your body, your brain, I suppose, telling you very loud and clearly, don't do that again, you dickhead. Do you remember how bad you felt? Yeah, you don't want to feel bad, do you? No. I don't like feeling bad. But okay, well, do good things, and then you won't feel bad about yourself. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people on the internet, and this is speaking generalization, but whatever, who haven't got that. Or they feel good about doing bad things, which is a psychopath, isn't it? It's they go online, they're horrible, they bully, they belittle, they condescend, they cruelly point out things that that person might not want pointed out. It's cruel. And it's not to the great and the good. It's not to the billionaires of the world. It is to just some other person who they don't know most of the time in real life. And that's heartbreaking. That is proper heartbreaking that it goes down like that. It really is. Is Graham back in the UK? Nope, this is not the UK yet. That's not going to happen for a few more days yet. The Earth isn't a closed system. It's powered by the sun, says Shane K. Yeah, but stuff can't get out. It's effectively a closed system. You get heat in, and you need to regulate that heat that comes in. But yeah, good point. You do have the sun. The Star Trek universe. So yeah, adding energy. The Star Trek universe seems to be a post-scarcity universe since the invention of the universal replicator. Yeah, you have to remember Star Trek Next Generation was a flop in its first season. The US government was turned off by its utopian vision. Season 2 was retooled to include conflict. Yeah, they did. They didn't introduce any of the villains, did they? They had the Borg that was completely ripped off the Cybermen from Doctor Who. You had I'm going to diss Star Trek here. You had Data's brother Law that was totally ripped off Knight Rider because Kit the car had a twin brother called Car, who was the first, but went a bit wrong, went a bit haywire in the old AI department, and would say things like, I am the prototype, you are an inferior production model to poor old Kit, which might sound familiar to anyone who watched Star Trek and saw Law say pretty much the same thing in Star Trek. And then there was a crystalline entity, and that was ripped off something. I forgot what that was ripped off, but there's quite a few elements in Star Trek now that you think, oh yeah, they had a look at that and thought, yeah. My advice is if you live in West Wales, North Devon, stay indoors, keep safe people. Yes, please. You're right, Martin. Please do. Orville was showing so much promise. Most Trek take a few seasons to get good. Gutted that seems over. Yeah, Hornet. I mean, there's this propensity now for like shows to have to do well in the first season, and go back and watch like any show, with the possible exception of Fawlty Towers, which was great from the get-go. The first season of Red Dwarf is crap. It's got a few memorable bits in it, but generally speaking, it's nowhere near as funny. It really hit its stride in the third season. That third season of Red Dwarf was bloody brilliant. Every episode is an absolute bloody gem. And then after that, the fourth season was really good, fifth, but then they started repeating some ideas, and also I felt at some point they kind of lost their way in that they would want to do science fiction stuff, but they had kind of painted themselves into a corner in the Red Dwarf universe because the idea was there were no aliens. So the only other people populating the Red Dwarf universe are humans, holograms, and Gelfs, who are genetically engineered life forms, engineered by humans. So yeah, to introduce sort of new things and conflict within the crew the idea of every single episode being a bottle episode with these very different personalities trying to get along, stuck in the vacuum of space. And don't forget, nearly every sitcom is a bunch of people who would never hang out with each other hanging out with each other because they have to, which is Red Dwarf to a T. My favorite Red Dwarf episode of all time is Maroon, the one where they're on the ice planet, and it's just Lister and Rimmer, and it's just a two-hander. It could be like a play. It could be like Waiting for Godot or something, and it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant. Every line in it is just an absolute gem, and it really explores the personality types of Lister and Rimmer, and what makes them tick. And I thought it was great. I thought it was fantastic. Didn't need to have, Gelfs or genetically engineered life form, whatever. And they didn't have to wake up and it was all a dream. That kept happening in Red Dwarf. It was all a game. Okay. Do we have to do this again? Did Graham see my super chat? Yes, I did, one Angry Pagan, and I said thank you very much for the super chat. It was very kind of you. Unless you sent me another one, which I don't think you did. But thank you. Blessed be to you. What are you doing for your Yuletide's coming up in a couple of weeks' time? I'll start getting some presents. Please consider signing the parliamentary petition, review the royal duchies, crown estates, and sovereign grants. Oh, yes. Okay, that yes. I will sign that petition. I'll spread that on my social media if I remember. And Sarah says, hi, Graham. Hi, everyone. Hi, Sarah. How you doing? So we're talking today about how people on the right tend to be looking forward to a dystopian future, whereas people on the left generally seem to be looking forward to a utopian future, or want to be building toward a dystopian, a utopian future. And why is that? What is it about people's life experiences, personality types? Why is it that you've got people who want to create, and then you've just got people who want to destroy? People who see some beautiful work of art, and the first instinct is to graffiti it, or to smash it, or to wreck it in some way. That kind of, I forgot the name of the guy. I mean, we were all supposed to forget the name of the guy, but the guy who famously burnt down the temple of Artemis at Ephesus in Turkey back in antiquity, he did it to become famous. Like the guy who shot John Lennon did it to become famous. And to allow them to be named and people know what their names are, then that's where, I don't write their names, by the way. I don't want to know. They did it to become famous. Don't say their names. But their MO in both cases was to take something that gave so many people happiness and joy and take it away from everyone, because they wanted the power to do that, like an absolute arsehole. And unfortunately for us, I think those people are in the vanishing minority, by the way. I think the vast majority of people want to see things get better. However, when those kinds of people, those dystopian type people, get in to high office, they take a wrecking ball to stuff. Thatcher, you saw this with her attitude towards the unions and to industry in the UK. She wound down industry. She wanted to allow Liverpool to fall into managed decline, as they called it. Then you've got the Conservative administration of the last 14 years, which was just an absolute car crash. They just wanted to destroy everything. Cameron wanted to destroy the union, the referendum in Scotland, and the way that they went about that. No way should it have been done in that way. That tore Scotland apart. And the SNP have to take some blame in this as well, because the SNP, they had the say in how the referendum was formulated. It should have been an opportunity to get a lot more devolved powers to Scotland. But it wasn't. It didn't end up that way, and it just creates a lot of division in Scotland. And then you had the Brexit referendum, obviously destroying not just our place at the high table of the European Union, but also destroying our relations with our closest neighbours and our dearest neighbours, our friends, destroying relationships, destroying families, tearing people apart. I mean, and then you've got the attitudes of people, setting neighbour against neighbour, colleague against colleague, friend against friend, nephew against uncle, vice versa. All these things were ruined by the Conservatives. And then obviously you had Boris Johnson come along, and he wanted to wreck everything. The NHS ruined education, state education. Not that they gave a shit about state education because they were all privately educated. So when Michael Gove and Dominic Cummings were plotting to rejig the GCSE syllabus and change how the national curriculum was taught, and change things so that if your kid misses school because they spend an extra day on holiday, you can get a massive fine. That doesn't happen in private schools, by the way. In private schools, they don't have to follow the curriculum. They don't have to be inspected by Ofsted. They don't have to do GCSEs if they don't want to. They can do anything they want. Oh, the teachers don't need to be qualified. You just get someone from the pub to come to your private school and teach whatever they want. And all they do is they get into positions of power, like what Cummings and Gove did in the early 2000s, and then they overhaul the education system for everybody else. Not for themselves. Cummings is a man who lives in a castle, for fuck's sake. I mean, yeah. And then, yeah, the absolute carnage during lockdown, during the COVID pandemic, in which twice as many people died in the UK through COVID as died in Japan. More than twice, actually. I think it was 225,000 last count. Died of COVID in the UK. In Japan, it was around 75,000. So a lot more people died in the UK. And the population of Japan, there's 130 million. It's almost twice the population of the UK. Almost. And much more urban density. The population density. It's a lot more dense population. I don't mean that sounds awful, doesn't it? The population is a lot more dense in Japan. No, they're not. They're very clever people. Bit racist, but you know, we've been to Australia. We know what it's like. But yeah, the Tories, and then we got the mini budget. You know, took a wrecking ball to our economy, to our pensions. 425 million pound black hole. Billion with a B, blown in our pension funds because of Liz Truss. And the price of a pint of beer doubling. Labour didn't make enough of this. That would have been all of my posters going up to that election, would have just been about the price of a pint of lager. And so we need to, and I've spoken about this. I mean, I don't want to sort of, I made a point, I feel. We've had half an hour of this, about the sort of different psychologies. But one thing I was thinking about yesterday was this. The right are not only very good at comms, they're also very good at advertising and psychology and getting into people's heads. But they're also great at sowing division on the left. And they will pick up a particular cultural touchstone or argument or whatever you want to call it, or some nascent prejudice, and they will press that button. They will really press against that wound. So, for instance, in Labour, it was anti-Semitism under the Corbyn administration, under the Corbyn years, when you had rampant anti-Semitism. The leader doing fuck all about it, and I'm not having people say, "Oh, but he tried." But no, he didn't. Shut up. Don't lie. Don't make stuff up. Don't gaslight me and pretend that all the shit that happened didn't happen. 2 of my MPs in Liverpool, we only have 5 MPs, and 2 of them, Jewish women, both left Labour, citing anti-Semitism. If they were black and they were saying that racism, we're leaving because of the racism, and if any white person said, well, no, it's all overblown, it's only 0.0001% of the population of the Mars colony that are causing this problem. No, you don't get away with doing that. Stop it. If you're ever inclined to do that and go, oh no, I must defend Labour in this respect. No, don't. However, the right knew exactly how to make a bad situation, which was that we had a very ineffective sit on the fence leader who, for some reason, was insanely popular with a certain group of people. The rest of us, especially people who wanted to stay in the EU, wasn't very popular at all. And we saw that in the election when they suffered their worst defeat since 1935, which then Starmer took over, and then he led them to their best win ever in the history of the party, sinking the Tories down to 121 MPs. Brilliant. Yeah, all good, all good. But then you've got other issues that people on the right press upon to divide the left. Environmentalism, how we go about solving the problem of how we get around the problem. My alarm just went off on my phone. Wake up, Graham. Oh, geez, I'm awake. How do we get around the problem of climate change and the fact we're doing bloody bugger all about it, and we're actually creating more CO2 now than we ever have in history, and these big companies are making an absolute metric F ton of profit, and still going on burning as much fuel as possible when we have the technology for them not to have to do that, or for anyone to not have to do that. We can, if we went on a war footing, we just think about it. How do we get that message out? And then you've got people on the left who think, I know what I could do to get the message out. I can block the road in London, or I can stop this train from running in London. It's an electric train. And those of us who think, that's probably not the best strategy, we're divided over that. Brexit, the anti-Brexit party groups, People's Vote, March for Change, Best for Britain, European movements, Grassroots for Europe, Liverpool for Europe, Manchester for Europe, Northeast for Europe, all those different groups, right, all had slightly different ideas of what we could do to fight Brexit. And as a result of the lack of joined-up thinking and the fact that I feel like the right infiltrated the anti-Brexit movement to scupper it, meant that it never got done, right? We had 1 million people turn up in London a few times, but it didn't actually have the effect that it should have had. If that had been 1 million people marching against, I don't know, marching for fox hunting, rich people from the country who all vote Conservative, I'm sure the government would listen to them. So then you got the big one, sort of like now on the left, which is transphobia. So we have a group of people who consider themselves progressive, who are Labour MPs even, who see transphobia as the last refuge of a bigot, the last refuge of a left-wing bigot. Well, we can't be bigoted against Muslims anymore, or Jewish people, or women in general. So let's be bigoted towards trans women. And again, creating a problem out of nothing, but that problem is exacerbated. The problem of it being an issue, that is what the problem is. It shouldn't be an issue. It absolutely shouldn't be an issue. The only reason why men and women's toilets are separated, first of all, it was the Victorian era, and obviously, going through your ablutions and having another gender hearing you tinkle, that would be against the morals of the universe. Make little baby Jesus cry. But then more latterly, the reason why there are men and women's toilets is sexism, pure misogyny, absolute misogyny. That is why we don't just have a toilet that everyone can use, cubicles, and second off urinals and communal basins. The only reason we don't is because men design buildings. All these buildings out the window, they were designed by men. Men, like thousands, millions of buildings around the world designed by men. And you know what men don't want to have to do? They don't have to queue up to use the toilet. So what do? They separate out the women from the men, so the women have to queue because the footprint of the women's toilet is always the same size as the footprint of the men's toilet, even though the women's toilet needs to be bigger. Architects, wankers. But yeah, it's just sexism. That's all it is. And yet you've got people like XY Rolling who pick up on this and say, toilets, public toilets are our safe space. No, they're not. No, they're not. There's a public place. It's only as safe as going into a freaking library or, going into a town square or something. This is my safe place. No, it's not. Whoever came up with that? Who goes, I'm feeling a bit stressed today. I'll go and sit in a dirty toilet. Like J.K. Rowling ever had to use those toilets in the last 30 years since Harry Potter became a thing. Like she shits in a golden toilet on her fucking super yacht. Like she doesn't have to use the toilet in a National Express coach station in Scunthorpe. Like she doesn't have to do that. She will never have to do that. And the idea that National Express toilet is a safe space for women is bonkers. And also, it's going over to that sort of thing that I've experienced on my travels, where in places like Egypt, India, and especially Saudi Arabia, the segregation of men and women. So you have trains in Egypt, and you have women-only carriages, and that's a religious thing. It's to stop the men having naughty thoughts. In the same way that if you go to a synagogue, the men will be down in the pews at the bottom, and then yeah, they are called pews, aren't they? And then the women will be in the balcony, and it's so the men concentrate on praying. There's going to be some Jewish person watching this going, well, that's not actually what it says in the Torah, Graham. You know, in the Talmud, it does explain this very well. But no, but basically it's like the women will distract the men from their prayers because women are sexy or something. And that same idea pervades in Middle Eastern countries like like in Saudi Arabia, where it's a deeply, deeply misogynistic, sexist country in which women until recently weren't allowed to drive. Women weren't allowed to have any rights at all. If a woman testified in court, her testimony would only be worth 2/3 or a half of a man's. And so if a woman was sexually assaulted, she needed two men to back up what she said. Because if it was just a he said, she said situation, they would always go with the man. But you know, there's lots of safe spaces in Saudi Arabia where they have a different restaurant. Well, they'll have a building with one kitchen, and then they'll have two parts to it. They'll have the men's part, that's where single men go, and then you have the family part, which the women and children and the married person I don't know. It was just a bit weird. I just remember going into restaurants and they're having two front doors, and basically I had to use this one and I wasn't allowed to use that one because that was a safe space for women. You think anywhere in Saudi Arabia is a safe space for women? Okay, mate. All right, behave. So yeah, but this is an issue that the right are pressing down on the wound on because they know that it divides the left. Brexit, I mean, going back to Brexit as well, there were Lexiteers. There were people who honestly thought that, you know, on the left that thought that this Tory policy, this Tory flagship policy of separating us off from our own continent and stopping our own children from living and working in other countries, you know, without having to pay loads of money. So essentially, the people on the left who supported Brexit wanted to make it so that only the rich kids, only the nepo babies could afford to go and live and work in other countries around our own continent. And everybody else, the 93% of us who weren't born with a silver spoon up our arse, up our collective arses, we were left. No. We're going to take those rights away from you. We're not going to take them away from Nigel Farage or his kids. We're not going to take them away from Boris Johnson or his kids or Dominic Cummings or anyone. No, we're not going to take them away from the rich. They will still have the right to go and live and work anywhere in Europe because they've got the money to do so. They can afford the visas, the work permits. They can afford to pay someone to go and get the visas for them. So they don't have to waste their own time hanging around embassies in London. They can do all this. They can do all that. They've got the money. They've got the money. The rest of us, not anymore. How anyone on the left could support that? Take away our workers' rights. Take away our human rights. The Tories now want to leave the European Court of Human Rights. I know Kenny Badenoch's kind of back-heeled that, but yeah, that was Robert Jenrick's pitch. I'm going to leave the ECHR. Robert Degenerate. Anyway, wasn't it Mick Lint's opposition due to the rules of renationalisation on the railways, which was bullshit? BUFU Mike is talking absolute bollocks because who owns the French railways? Who owns SNCF? Who owns Deutsche Bahn? It's the German government, it's the French government, the Dutch government, the Belgian government, who owns the trains in Spain that run mainly on the plain. They are owned by the government. It's fine. You can do that. And that idea that we couldn't renationalise while we were part of the EU was you could show it was nonsense by the fact that a lot of our train companies that are ripping us off to the nth degree, costing us £180 return to London. It's cheaper to fly to another country than to go to freaking London on the train, or like a 2.5-hour train journey. And the idea that we couldn't do this because Europe was stopping us. European state-owned railway companies like Deutsche Bahn and SNCF, they own a lot of our franchises in the UK. So yeah, we already have nationalised train lines in the UK, or train services. It's just some of them on. It's just somebody else's nation. But yeah, Mick Lynch can go fuck himself over that. Mick Lynch is I like the guy when he's having a go at the Tories, but the fact is that the RMT union told people to vote for Brexit, told people to vote so that the working class could no longer go and work in Europe anymore. They have to stay here on this, I'm not in the UK at the moment, but stay in the UK forever and never ever leave. You do understand the difference. I'm all for nationalisation, but the rules, if you have gone to private railways and then reverted back to the rules, are different. Doesn't matter. Like the EU isn't some monolith that you can't get around the rules for. Of course you can. And they're all voluntary, by the way. Like anything that the EU decides to do, it's up to the individual countries to go along with it. Any kind of EU law had to be passed by British Parliament once, put on our statute books as an EU law. That's why we have several thousand of them, and why Jacob Rees-Mogg was like, I'm going to get rid of all these European laws. And they couldn't do it because so many of them were entwined in British law. It would be to try and unpick all that was just nonsense. So they picked like a few hundred that were about apricot growing in the south of fucking Spain or something. And they went, okay, we'll get rid of that because you don't grow apricots or whatever the bloody hell it was that we didn't we can get rid of these rules concerning figs. We don't need them. And it was like, oh wow, we got rid of these rules off the statute books that nobody uses and nobody cares about. It's like, okay, great, well done. That was a good use of parliamentary time, wasn't it? It's almost as though they didn't have anything to do in the last few years of the Tory administration. But yeah, Lexity is to me an absolute bloody disgrace. However, talking about how the right manipulate and press down on the wound, so that whenever there's any division amongst progressives, whether that is on tactics, whether it's on the environment, trans rights, the anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, whenever there is division, whenever there's heated debates going on amongst the left, the right will laser focus on those and make them worse. It will exacerbate the problem. We need to do that to the right. We need to identify. This is what I want to do with this think tank. This is think tank idea where we can pay people to make content, where we can pay people to produce reports and to lobby MPs. We also need to fuck up the right. Find things that they disagree on and make it worse. Make them fight each other. Divide and conquer. Did we not learn anything from the past? Like our running around the world's basically taking over other people's countries. How did we do that? We didn't do it by arguing amongst ourselves. No, we made the other people argue amongst themselves. In that great line by Patton, no one ever won a war by dying for their country. You win wars by making some other poor bastard die for their country. That's how you do it. And so we are missing a trick on the left again and again and again. Look, with our funding, with our tactics, with our strategy, which is the same as tactics, really, with the way we go about our debates and things like that. We spend a lot of time debating ourselves and arguing amongst ourselves about stuff. And what we really need to be doing is being smarter. Don't work harder, work smarter. And so I would like to see the left, almost in conclusion of this video, talking about how we can achieve that Star Trek utopia in the future with all these people who don't want that, who just want people to be at each other's throats forever. Yeah, it's just one of those things that we really need to be accelerating, especially next year. Trump's going to be in. It's going to be carnage. I feel really sorry for America. Then again, I feel sorry for the world because America is a big part of the world. I wish it wasn't, but here we are. Bearing in mind on campaign to remain, how do you get around them, or is it magical thinking? Don't get the wrong thing started changing, but considering how wrong you are. No, Corbyn can go fuck himself forever. He is a scumbag. Like, he is a man who was privately educated, who went to university, paid for by a union, dropped out, sorry, Polytechnic, got dropped out because he couldn't be arsed, paid for by the union members. Go fuck himself. And then he went to Jamaica on holiday for a few years on daddy's pound. And then he came back and became a career politician who all he did was vote with the Tories for like 3 decades on everything. He voted against the Labour Party when they were in power every single time. And it wasn't just, I mean, if it was just the Iraq War, I'd agree with him. I'd go, yeah, that was a shit idea. And a lot of MPs obviously said, no, I cannot support this at all. And that would have been fine. But it was so many things. He voted with the Tories against his own government. And at the time, it didn't really matter because he was just a backbencher. But then when he became leader, him and his clique is privately educated. Everyone around Corbyn was privately educated. You've got to understand this, right? None of them lived in the real world. Andrew Murray was a fucking lord. He was a member of the aristocracy. We had the little man who followed him around, what's his name, Seamus Milne. He was privately educated. The MPs that he had around him were all privately educated. It was insane. It was grotesque. It was a group of people who were working in the mentality of this Westminster bubble. We talk about career politicians. We talk about the fact that there are a lack of people with real life experience of being a doctor, being a teacher, being a nurse, being working on the railways, whatever it is. And these people absolutely 100% personified those people. And that man's arrogance was what led to Johnson winning the 2019 election. One man's arrogance. Any other leader would have torn chunks out of him. And I'm not letting Swinson off the hook here because she was a fucking knobhead as well. But they had the choice to whether to go ahead with a winter election. A winter election in December. Like, you gotta open the door to a canvasser and leave your door open while all the hot air leaves your house and the place is freezing cold with icicles hanging off the bloody the lampshade. And you got to be standing there discussing the 180 page Labour manifesto. I don't think so. They were given data from Best for Britain, which was put together, this polling data over the summer of 2019, and it was paid for by the guy who runs Superdry. So they spent like £1 million putting this data together, and they presented it to Labour, and it said if they go for a general election, and don't forget at the time, the Tories couldn't choose when they wanted an election, they had to get Labour on side in order to have an election. The Tories at the time were in disarray. The whip had been taken from a bunch of Tory MPs. They didn't have a majority. The Brexit was just destroying it from within. It was ripe for being crushed under the foot of Labour at that point. And instead of using that to our advantage and making it so that the Tories, they were on their knees, never got up again. They had just prorogued Parliament illegally. They just had that election in the summer of 2019 in which Theresa May got like 8% of the votes. 8% of the votes. You go, oh, but they only did well in the last election because the Tories did so badly. Yeah, but in that EU election, Labour got 14% of the vote. So it's not like they were, miles ahead in any way, shape, or form. And the way that Labour looked at the information given to them by Best for Britain, this polling data, which was just demonically accurate, that said that if we go for an election now, the Tories will win a landslide victory of around 80 seats. And it was demonically accurate because they'd done the research. They'd asked people, who are you going to vote for? And people were like, I'm not going to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. Simple as that. Plus, Jeremy Corbyn wouldn't entertain the idea of having a national government at the time, which would have been great because we would have been going into COVID and we kind of needed a national government, a government of national unity going into COVID. So that could have all worked and helped. But he didn't want to be part of it unless he led it. I mean, how arrogant do you have to be? How deranged and narcissistic do you have to be he went to a private prep school, and then he went to a state senior school, but high school, but he went to a private prep school and then lived that life of absolute ease of, being a nice MP. He turns up, gets a good wage, and doesn't really care about anything but himself. I mean, I think the guy's an idiot as well. I genuinely think he's not all there. And he reminded me of this character from the 1979 Peter Sellers movie, Being There. I think his name is Chauncey Gardner, or Chancy Gardner. And he was just a simple man who liked his garden, liked his allotment, and they mistook him talking about how much he likes plants for, how much how he'll be a great candidate to be the president for some reason. And you watched it go, and this would never happen. It kind of did. But yeah, the cult of personality also pissed me off. I don't like anyone who gets that kind of cult around them. It pisses me off. I wish we would stop doing it as humans. And it might not be his fault that he generated this cult, but it was so nasty. It was so vicious. It was not a nice time to be a Labour member. I famously got kicked out, infamously got kicked out of the party at the time. And Labour became a very, very unwelcoming place to be. And the fact that two of my MPs, I say my MPs, I mean Liverpool MPs, left, two people, Louise Ellman and Luciana Berger, who both stood with me on platforms and marched with me against the Tory flagship policy of taking fundamental human rights away from all the working class people, but keeping them for the rich, which is what Brexit is. That's all it is at the end of the day. You can talk to me about tariffs and trade and all this bullshit. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that we had these rights, and those rights were taken away from us by rich people who aren't affected by those rights being taken away from us. Corbyn's kids can still go and live anywhere they want in Europe because he's rich. He lives in Islington. He's got loads of money. I can't. They can't. Chauncey Gardner was an idiot savant whose meaningless Yodaisms were taken as a sign of down-to-earth wisdom. Yes, Aquadate. You put it very, very well. In 1 year time, it might be the only left-to-centre government in the G7. Yes, that's very true. I don't think Corbyn was ever the right leader for Labour. They needed a real left-wing leader, not just a left-winger. If only John Smith had lived. Yeah. I mean, John Smith was carrying on the legacy of Neil Kinnock. I mean, he wasn't, he was more left-wing than Blair, obviously. And it would have been really interesting to see what, the thought experiment of what would have happened had he not died and Labour won the 1997 election, how different things would have turned out. I don't think John Smith would have gone into Iraq or Afghanistan. I mean, I just don't think he would have done. Don't forget, Britain didn't go into Vietnam in the 60s because the likes of Harold Wilson were like, no, why are we going to go and, why are we going to go there? The Australians did, there were Australians who fought in Vietnam along with the Yanks in a war that just couldn't be won. And I'll tell you now, if any future, governments or countries, whatever, think, hey, I've got a good idea. Let's invade Afghanistan again. Stop it. Just stop it. It's never, ever worked. In the history of the world, it has never worked invading Afghanistan. The only person who's ever kind of achieved it was Alexander the Great, and then he went into India, went too far. I mean, got knocked back. It's not been great for people who tried that. I mean, the people that turned up, I think Genghis Khan went to Afghanistan. Tamerlane came in. I think he destroyed some cities there. I think he destroyed Herat or something. But they couldn't hang around. A few years later, the Afghanis took back over. But there you go. So much for PR and rejoining the EU. Going off Starmer's recent comments, some of us did say this would happen. Lol. I never thought that Starmer was going to rejoin the EU. He never said he was going to do that. Even when he was standing for leader, he didn't say he was going to rejoin the EU. He never promised that or said he was going to try for that. And as far as PR is concerned, whether it's press reform or proportional representation, which was had a vote in Parliament last week about proportional representation. I mean, people are talking about it. There's a lot of MPs who want it. The excuse that I hear all the time, and I've got a little bit of credence for this, is that it's not what people are talking about on the doorstep. And I get that. While we're living in a cost of living crisis, while we're living with the worst backlog of NHS operations and all that kind of stuff, I understand that you've got to prioritize, not necessarily do away with any idea of proportional representation, you know, or democratic reform, which I think is sorely needed in the country. It does piss me off that you have a country where 50% of the population vote right wing, 50% of the population vote left wing. However, 66% of the time, it's a right wing government in power. And that's not a system that is a good one. And it's not a system that helps Labour either, don't forget. And I like the idea of both parties moving, you know, the Overton window moving back to the centre, moving back to the centre left, preferably, like it was arguably in the 60s and 70s, which, you know, even in the 40s after World War II, I mean, the fact that the NHS was launched from the ashes of the Blitz is amazing. Like, it was done. It was. If you need to find the money, you can always find the money. That's what I find about, you know, history of democracies around the world, capitalist democracies. When they need to find money, they can find money. Whether that's for a war or whether that's for a furlough scheme, they'll find the money. People be supporting political parties like their favourite football team. It's tragic, says Gary. Yeah, but I think that's why it's important that people keep an open mind and are willing to entertain the idea of voting for another party who might better represent their interests. And this is why I was a bit perplexed a couple of years ago when I was at the Labour Party conference, and me, you know, and Jones had an argument, and his argument to me was basically because I'd not always voted Labour, because I've actually, you know, stood as an MP against a Labour candidate. You know, I've stood as a councillor for the Lib Dems in the past. That my view on the importance of the Tories being yeeted out of office was less valid than his. And yet, a few months ago, just before the election, Owen Jones jumped ship from Labour and joined the Greens, which is fine. And I'd rather he was part of the Greens and, you know, working that angle rather than being inside Labour, causing turmoil and people to argue with each other within that group. If you don't like Labour policy, if you don't like what Labour are doing, if you don't like Keir Starmer, don't be a member of Labour. There are other parties to choose from. However, our stupid first past the post system means that those parties are never really going to get into power, are they? Well, yeah, who knows? The Lib Dems got in 2010 because they joined up with the Tories. So, you know, it's doable. Nick Clegg was the Deputy Prime Minister for a bit. He was a Lib Dem. He's a dickhead, but he was a Lib Dem. So, yeah, I think that there is a lot of support within Labour members. We know we had a vote a couple of years ago in the Labour Party conference to adopt PR, or to change our electoral system to a more fairer system, which is what I'd love to see. And I think that this is something that I don't think that Starmer or the Labour government are going to be focused on. But if private members' bills are going in and being discussed, and this thing is, you know, going through Parliament, it can change things. It can change things. I mean, I think the PR vote went through by like 2, didn't it? 2. Was it 2? The majority of 2. It was like 160 to 162. And it was a bit of a shock because people didn't think it was going to get through, and it did. And it might die. I mean, the bill might die at some point in the future, but at least it's being discussed. At least that is there, because it's really important. It's really, really important. I'd love to see a system of PR in place by the next Parliament, just so that the Yahoos and Refuck and the Tory party don't, you know, blob together and create this disgusting monster with that Farage creep as its godhead. God, I hate seeing his fucking face. And Trump and Johnson, I just hate seeing their faces. I just hate going online, you know, and there's a news story and you're just scrolling through and there's a picture of this ugly little fucker. Mate, Jesus, not good. I know beauty's only skin deep, but those people are absolutely horrible, horrific, psychopathic lunatics who don't want the best for society or you know, even their own family and friends. They don't want the best for them. They just want everyone to suffer and for them to be king and queen of the Ashes. Anyway, and I don't mean the cricket trophy. Almost the funniest thing, the Tory party are made of free-thinking people. Yeah, indeed. Oh, what a shame, brave coward Jones ran away. That's something. How's their new partnership with BlackRock looking? Left wing lol. I'm not happy about that. That's just ridiculous. BlackRock are an evil company. In the same way that I'm pissed off that they're wasting any kind of time or effort on carbon capture technology or hydrogen, which I think is absolute bollocks. But then there's people on the left who think that carbon capture technology is a real thing and will actually help in some way. Oh, it's bullshit. Plant a fucking tree. And you've got the hydrogen lot. Hydrocarbons. Let's mix this hydrogen. How are you going to make the hydrogen? We're going to burn some fossil fuels to make the hydrogen. Okay, how does that stop the CO2 going into the atmosphere? We're going to capture the CO2. Oh, Jesus Christ. Because, underground cavities are great places to put put gases. They never escape. Indeed. Anyway, so I'm going to get going now. So thank you very much. I've been yakking on for an hour and 5 minutes. I'll try and do a quick show tomorrow. But if not, see you on Monday. And hopefully I'll be home in time next week for a really good Friday night social. Thanks to everyone who joined Ollie last night on his channel for the not the Friday night social, which was really cool. And I put in a slight appearance. I don't know how good it was because my internet was shit at the time. Need clean electricity to create green hydrogen, not that fossil fuel blue stuff. Green hydrogen's like, what is it, 2% of the hydrogen that we make, and it's more efficient to just, if you're gonna have a wind turbine and then hook it up to a hydrogen plant, you're best just hooking it straight up to someone's house. Just use the electricity, because every time you transform the electricity into transform the energy into some other thing, it loses energy, at every step of that process. Capturing carbon is like Wile E. Coyote getting the Roadrunner. Yes, it is. Farewell, folks, says GD Ball. Your people need you to come home safe. Thank you very much, Sarah, over in Wales. I'll be back hopefully tomorrow, but if not, Monday. And I just want to say thanks for the lively chat. It's always lively. On this channel. And hopefully we'll get business some return to normality pretty soon. Maybe Friday. I think Friday, next Friday. Yeah, that we'll have an ordinary morning brew, and we'll have we'll have a bit of fun. Listen, before I go, before I forget, I'm going to be putting the details of the meetup on Wednesday. So if you're in London around lunchtime on Wednesday, please don't come down from somewhere else. I don't think it'd be worth it. But if you are in North London area, around Euston, King's Cross, etc., I'll be putting the details on Discord. So if you're a YouTube member or you're of this channel, or you are a patron of this channel, thank you. You keep us afloat. But yeah, if you are, then if you fancy meeting up with me and A. Thompson for a drink around lunchtime on Wednesday in London, you are very welcome to come and join us. And until next time, I'll say thanks very much for watching. Thanks for the super chats. Super chat. Thank you very much, One Angry Pagan. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye. Bye. And drink some water.